Hey everyone, welcome back to another 6.5 on the road here at Evolve NYC 2022, brought to you by Cloudera, Intel, and IBM. I'm Daniel Newman, Principal Analyst at Futurum Research, joined by my esteemed colleague, co-host, Patrick Moorhead. Pat?
How you doing, buddy?
It's good to be here. It's good to be back. It's been a great day of conversations, and we've got another great one lined up here in just a few.
No, it's super, and it was pretty special doing the kickoff for the event. I learned a lot. My energy is high. I've had many cups of coffee, and I am super duper excited to talk about products, because you know that in the end, I'm a product guy.
I do. Right? Every once in a while, I've been on the road with you, and you've said something like, back 20 years ago when I had a real job. By the way, I do the same thing with my kids. I'm like, back 20 years ago when I in school, or when I was learning to drive, you know. Fortunately, back 20 years ago, I was still a child, but you know, we're not going to age ourselves out here. We're having fun. It's been a great event. Data is the theme, but we've taken that in a lot of directions, because I think what we've ultimately discovered here and at pretty much all the events we attend is that to get to those business outcomes that every company is trying to get to, it's going to take an amalgamation. It's going to take a really great data management strategy. It's going to be coupled with having the right partners, the right applications, the right infrastructure, architecture. And who better to talk architecture with than the Chief Product Officer at Cloudera. Suds, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
So quick intro and specs for everybody out there.
Sure. So I'm Sudhir Menon. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Cloudera. I've been with Cloudera for about 3 years. I used to run the platform business before that. I've been an entrepreneur. I've run my own startup in the past and worked for companies like VMware and Pivotal and others in the past. I run R&D and support, which means that everything that goes right, I get credit for it, and everything that goes wrong is my problem.
Now wait a second, that's changed since I was doing products 20 years ago.
Nice.
Actually, it was only 10 years ago. Okay. But where typically, if something went right, it was the office of the CTO or somebody like that got credit. If it went wrong, it was your credit. But no, listen, we're here to talk about, I think what's on everybody's mind relating to Cloudera is how do you ultimately make your decisions about your roadmap? And a lot of companies take hey, tech first, it's shiny object, let's go shove it in here, which by the way, all due respect for technology, but I'm sure you have a different methodology that's driven by some trends, and maybe if we could start with some macro trends that are directly impacting decisions that you make on your roadmap.
It's a very good question. We, as Cloudera, and we serve some of the largest enterprises. We actually, I would say, have the luxury of learning from our customers, understanding real world problems, understanding what are the business outcomes that they're trying to get to. And then as an open source company that actually had its start in open source, we still have the grassroots community. We work with developers, we look at trends in the data space, and it's safe to say that almost every improvement or any innovation that has happened in data over the last 10 years has been driven out of open source. So we get both perspectives.
Right.
And we kind of try to amalgamate the two in coming up with the decisions that we make for the product. And some of the trends that actually have shaped our thinking over the last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, as hard as it has been with COVID to actually get out there and talk to people, some of the things that have become real is we are about 15 years into cloud being a thing. And I think 15 years, just like your financial advisor, you've been with your financial advisor for like 1 year, you don't know what their performance is like. 5 years later, there's a track record. 10 years later, you know how much money you paid for what you got, right? So we are in that phase of cloud adoption. So people are starting to take a look at I am in steady state. What does my cost profile look like? The other thing is that we've gotten, that is one trend. The other thing that we are seeing is initially it was all about who has the skills to get on the cloud. So the old school companies were like, no, we're not going to do it. Some of the startups were like, hey, we're going to go go crush this.
Right.
Now what has happened is that you are starting to see CIOs worry about technology lock-in, right? I mean, do I have the right skills? Am I actually locking myself up? So that's another thing which is actually driving the conversation around hybrid. The third thing, which is actually more of the grassroots thing, is that, look, I mean, we were the beneficiaries of the innovation that led to this whole big data ecosystem. All of those Apache projects that we worked on that became part of our platform were base level innovations that were signaled the start of an industry. 15 years later, what we are finding is that innovations now actually have to satisfy multiple cohorts of people. If you come up with a new open source innovation, it actually has to work with things that are there in the ecosystem today in order for it to be picked up, right? Similarly, things like enterprise readiness, backwards compatibility, these things are becoming very real for customers. And so the open source community actually has to innovate. And this was the theme of one of my keynotes recently, that open source itself has to become much more industrialized. So that's one macro theme. Hybrid is another thing. And the third thing is cost. Because back when you were doing products, you remember we talk about user kernel crossings. Every time a piece of data goes into user mode down into kernel mode, there is an I don't think they talk about that. Things like that anymore.
Thank goodness.
Here's the deal though. When you use 5 products to actually build your application, you're incurring the costs for all of those user kernel crossings. So the TCO argument becomes actually very real because now you're paying by the minute.
Right.
You're paying by the second actually, right? So those are some of the trends that we see driving. So the other thing is like this ecosystem has become very varied. So observability becomes a key part of how customers are able to keep their systems running. So those are some of the themes that actually drive our thinking, both top down, bottom up, and that's how I make decisions.
I appreciate that.
So maybe we just kind of drill down on a one-by-one basis. I feel like you spent a little time on open source. You kind of dug, and then you got to the next two, and you went quickly with hybrid, and then cost, and then you observability, and maybe Pat, we can just kind of ping pong.
Sure.
Because I'd love to. Watching the opening keynotes, I found out that my cloud sucks. Thank you, Patrick. But in all seriousness, I did see theme from speaker to speaker to speaker, and hybrid was a theme. Cloudera seems to be doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on hybrid. Talk a bit about that theme as you're seeing it and how it's driving your product.
I mean, 3 years ago, when we talked about hybrid, people would look at us. I mean, they would be polite, but people were like, well, these guys didn't cut it in the cloud, so they want to talk about hybrid, right? That's no longer the case. Now, what we knew at the time, and common sense ultimately wins out, but what we knew at the time was if you are running workloads on hundreds of petabytes of data, and you're burning up thousands of CPUs, and you're running them 24/7, it is only a matter of time before you figure out that the cost doesn't work out. Okay, so that happened over the last 3 years as workloads matured. This is true of, as you get more experience, you learn, you have the track record. So when that happened, people were like, look, there is absolutely no argument that building new applications is faster and easier if you go to the cloud, because who wants to wait 3 weeks to get something, hardware provision?
Right.
Who wants to wait, 6 months to get through legal approval to actually buy software? The cloud simplifies all of that, and there is no way that it's ever going to go away. But once you build these applications and once you get them into production, what happens is you're now successful. Let's say you're running a data warehouse, you're running some workloads that produce dashboards. Your dashboard is popular. More and more people actually ask for it. So now these are like custom slices on that data, which means you're burning CPU, you're burning memory and networking and so on. So the cost starts to increase. If you're running workloads that need to run 24/7, there comes a point in time where it doesn't make sense to run those workloads in the cloud, especially for organizations that can amortize that cost over with hardware that they have on-prem. So we are starting to see customers, and there are 57%, I mean there was a slide up there, I think 57% of customers have actually repatriated workloads back on-prem. Now the key to doing that is three things, right? One is you need to be able, you're not going to build an application that uses certain APIs on-prem, that uses different APIs in the cloud. You need a common layer of security governance. You don't want to have a security model here and then have a different security model with Amazon and a different one with Google. Those things cause a lot of friction.
They're incompatible.
And they're completely incompatible, right? So you want to have security, you want to have lineage of where the data, and then you need a policy-driven way of actually moving data and metadata and the workload itself. So this is where the whole open thing becomes important. If you're using products that are built on top of open APIs, that are built on top of open source, where the innovation actually guarantees interoperability, you have the ability to take it from on-prem to the cloud or cloud to another cloud or back on-prem.
Right.
And that is the end state. Now why do we talk about the end state? Because we have some of the largest customers on earth. The end state does matter to them. So that, for us, it wasn't very revolutionary talking about hybrid.
Sure.
Right? So that's, we just getting to a point where two things are happening. First is the market's understanding of hybrid is actually getting to be more mature, as you pointed out. The other thing that's happening is that our tech is finally getting to the point where everything that I talked about, being able to move data services, being able to actually have security governance and lineage that spans cloud, adding support for things like Spot instances in different clouds. All of those you need real software to make that happen. That's all coming together, which is what makes hybrid real for our customers. And that's why and the other thing is, look, people are ultimately driven by, by personal motivations, right? So what happens is that initially there was a push to if I'm not in the cloud, my career isn't going anywhere,
exactly.
Right? So today what we are doing is we're giving them skills that we're building cloud native products that they can move to the cloud. So they look smarter, and that kind of makes them stickier. So that's our whole hybrid thesis there.
Yeah, it all kind of came together when Andreessen Horowitz came out on A16Z site talking about repatriating workloads. I almost fell over in my chair when I saw it, because if there's a company that has made hundreds and billions of dollars of profit off the public cloud, it's Andreessen Horowitz, and their premise was exactly what you talked about, which was, listen, in startup mode and in scale mode and for super seasonal, it makes total sense. But if you're not there, and quite frankly, I don't know any of Andreessen Horowitz's investments that are mature, well, maybe 10 years ago with something like Facebook, but it was pretty big. It was the first cloud native VC that came out and did this. And by the way, to me, it was an inevitability anyways, like I discussed in my talk, but we didn't do the industry any favors by stubbing our toe on OpenStack. So in our preface up here, you had used a term that I've never heard anybody from Cloudera make, that was observability. Mm-hmm. And Daniel and our companies both track observability companies. How does that relate to Cloudera?
Yeah. Right. So when I took over the Chief Product Officer role, I looked for both continuity and change. You don't want to be the guy who says everything's fine, I'm not going to change anything.
Right.
At the same time, you don't want to be the guy who disrupted everything and then caused the company to go under for another 12 months, while we work through that change. So one of the things that I saw fairly clearly was two things, right? That if we actually had standards-based observability in our platform, we would be able to tell our customers about how to more efficiently use our platform.
Right.
Okay, so that's one. The second thing, which is slightly further out, is like we live in a world that actually, where Cloudera is not the only player anymore. Best of breed includes Cloudera, but includes other products as well. So if a customer is going to actually have to, work with an ecosystem of products, then building a product that actually gives you observability across the stack,
Right.
reduces the total cost of ownership. Right. My initial, instinct was not to go and buy, not to go and build the product. We actually had a product called Workload Manager, but then, we looked at our options and we said anything that we build needs to work, needs to span on-prem and the cloud, needs to be available in PaaS and SaaS form factors, needs to be available, and you needs to use open standards. So we felt we had a healthy start on that. So we think that that's going to pay off big time. So everything that we are doing, all of these data services now expose metrics that allow us to look at performance. One of the things that is becoming super clear to customers is, look, when you buy your hardware and it's accounted for and the IT guy no longer has any bills to pay on that one, performance is like, hey, if I'm not getting performance, it's an annoyance. Like, I need better performance for my customers, right? But the costs are already baked in. I paid for the 100 machines or the 1,000 machines. But in the cloud, it's not like that. If the damn thing isn't running fast enough, what that means is it will run longer, which means the meter is running longer. You're paying more for EC2. So performance equals cost in the public cloud. And you need to have solid observability on performance, right? There's another area where Cloudera is actually looking at performance, cost optimization, performance optimization for the right reasons. I want better performance. Cost optimization, because performance optimization allows me to control costs, right? And the third thing is something that we don't have in the product, but we are starting to work through is, ultimately, the software industry, the cloud industry uses a lot of electricity, right? And we can only ignore climate change for so long. I mean, we will drive electric cars and all that, but at the end of the day, we need to actually figure out how to reduce our footprint for the workloads that we are running. So we are going from performance to cost to, at some point, the observability product will actually tell you, how sustainable your workloads are becoming, and give you the opportunity to actually do something about it.
Right.
Telling you all the way up to how much carbon have you burnt up, how much carbon have you produced as a result of running these workloads over the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and so on. So it's a big deal for us, doing observability the right way.
Yeah, you absolutely tied a lot of things together, and you even kind of brought the cost structure into that. But it sounds to me like if we really want to summate it, you've got 4 or so really big factors that are playing a part, so it's right now in driving your product strategy, which, by the way, is the culmination of what you're doing with Iceberg. It's the culmination of CDP1. It's that we are going to have these driving forces being brought together. We all know the kind of data proliferation, exponential data growth, but we also know that heterogeneous environments are the way of the future, and that means open.
Yep.
That means hybrid. And companies, especially in a market of that's going to be very likely recessionary. At the very least, we're going to see a major slowdown. Tech is going to be part of the solution, though, for this. So you got cost. You kind of dribbled in some sustainability in there, which I think every company needs to be thinking about responsibly approaching sustainability, and that's not consistent. There's a marketing sustainability, and then there's a doing, which...
I think, we are focused on the doing side of it, because this sustainability thing came about from a grassroots effort internally, where we have folks who are highly committed to, making the right choices when it comes to instance selection and so on, which making our product more sustainable. But one of the things that we did a hackathon recently internally, and one of the things that came out was, hey, what can we do to educate and inform our customers on how they can be more sustainable using our product? And in many cases, actually using less of my product to be more sustainable. But my product is getting better and better as we go. But that ultimately gives people one more reason to use my product.
Yeah, and I think whether people are on the sustainability bandwagon or not, when it comes to public companies, they are being held account from board of directors. And it's funny, no matter what side I found, that people, nobody is arguing with using less energy to do the same thing, right? I see that as efficiency. I think the rub gets into where maybe you went a little bit too far and there was a counterbalance. But I think like any type of thing, we'll find our stasis point here. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. I mean, I feel like I have a lot better idea of why you make the decisions that you make. And I've also, I've been accused of not being the best listener in the world, but I did hear a few future forward things that you're looking at. And whether it's observability, whether it's sustainability, different levels of openness, it's really exciting to see. I will tell you in the future, I am looking forward to CDP1 and where that goes. I feel like that's a force multiplier for you that nobody is counting into anything. But listen, I know you have there's a lot of execution work that needs to be done in moving customers to CDP Cloud. So I don't want to get the horse before the cart here, but anyways, thank you so much for being on the show, and we hope we'll have you on again.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
I appreciate that. So this is Pat Moorhead at Evolve 2022 here with my co-host Daniel Newman, Futurum Research and Chief Product Officer of Cloudera. Suds, thank you so much. We hope you liked the show. Hit that subscribe button if you liked it. Give us feedback on Twitter. You know where we live. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the globe. Take care.